It's a great way to begin this deepening that we'll be celebrating during Easter, but this will be the Friday night where it's dramatic, and you should come. It'd be fun. Today is Palm Sunday, and Palm Sunday, like many of those great holidays in the Christian calendar, always give me a hard time. I always have a hard time going like, how am I going to deal with this? Part of the reason I say that is because of the complexity of Unity's interpretation of traditional Christian symbols. Now, I was listening to a Catholic priest as I was getting ready for this, and he was very well grounded in the Catholic faith. And in the Catholic faith, Jesus is indeed the only being of his type ever to exist. And as such, he occupies a unique place in history and a unique place in their religion. And in that religion, all you really need to do is to come to Jesus, and then life is going to work out for you. Essentially, that's the message, and that Jesus is indeed the only Son of God. And it has been my thought since I was at least 16 years old that was a slight they were wrong, essentially. And that is that Jesus was not the only Son of God, but was the best example that we could find of what it is to be fully realized into the potential of your human divine connection. That you, like Jesus, are sons or daughters of God, and that you have potential to realize that, and the realization of that might resemble what Jesus did, but will have its own path. And so when we come to those historically recorded events of Jesus, like coming to Jerusalem and riding on a colt into the city, or being crucified and being resurrected, those we will use for symbols. And we will not leave them just for something historical or something that was 2,000 years ago, or for one person, but instead they become symbols for all of us. How the transformational process goes, that transformational process from seeing yourself as a body, as just a human being, to recognizing that the power and the presence of the Spirit lives as you. Not so much in you, but as you. It is you. And I'm not just talking about your body, because so often in our culture and so often as we grow up, we begin to identify with the body as being who we are. We feel that we are contained within the skin, that the skin is the perimeter of our existence, and that we are separate from the world and separate from everything else. And we are separate, threatened, frightened often, mortal thing. And that our lives are relatively short, and that we're at risk. And there's lack in the world, and there's not enough to go around, so we must fight for our fair share and then some. And that story of us being just that little thing with all the weaknesses and all the limitations that come with that little thing, that has been the easy one for us to hear and to accept because it resembles our experience so far. But what the story of Jesus, when we take it symbolically, is saying, yeah, well, that you might have had that as your experience. You may be in the midst of illness or poverty or grief or loss, but there is more to you than that. And though we take those symbols, the symbols that come through the Christian tradition, and we apply them to our lives so that we might have hope that though it feels like this, there is more to it. We are not limited by the feeling or the visuals or the history, but we are here to be reborn as Christed beings. In other words, as people who know their connection as a part of the one presence everywhere. That's what Easter means in this context. Not that Jesus was the only one to ever do that, but he is the one who shows the way. And so in Unity, they often call Jesus the way shower or the great example, and rather de-emphasize his exception. Now, I think if you walked in the room, I might actually really pay attention to the exception, because it's not likely that I'm going to meet anybody like him, nor will many other people. And it's very not likely that I will be exactly like him or even close to where he is. All of that. But I do believe that the message is not to say, because you won't be as good as LeBron James, you shouldn't play basketball. Because you can't walk on water, you shouldn't realize that you can rise above your emotions. Because you can't break bread and feed 5,000 with just a minor bit of starter material doesn't mean that I can't produce abundance in my heart and in my life. It is saying that when you master things like that, wild things can happen. But along the way, you too are a creator. You too can be born again. You can come out of whatever you're in and find victory. You too can know yourself as part of that one presence and quietly to yourself, if never out loud, say, yep, that's me. You could do that. And while Jesus is a great exception to most of us, he is more important, I think, as the great example. So that's how you do it. And so let's explore this little story about Jesus coming into Jerusalem. He comes into Jerusalem, as you know well enough, I think. He tells his disciples, go get this donkey, and it's tied up over there somewhere. He can't out of sight, but go that way, you'll find him. And then if anybody asks you, just tell them that the master needs it. And they do that. So I'm sure you're familiar with people and their sense of ownership, and so, yeah, oh yeah, sure, just take it. I guess that's right. But when you speak the word from the place of source, when you're speaking from that place, as you say a thing, so it is so. It's also true in your own psyche. When you say something and you hear yourself, you begin to create a vibration that draws to you the very events that you're talking about. And so how a man speaketh, that's what is his destiny or her destiny. As a man speaks, as a person speaks, as a woman speaks, so you begin the creation of the event. And that's why your speech is important. Because it's not just speech, it's the beginning of creation. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. In other words, it is the source. And that is the rough translation of the first words in the Gospel of John. And the word they're talking about is the Logos. And the Logos doesn't just mean word like our English language word. The Logos is the creative process. If you look up the Logos in the dictionary, it's 2 pages. It's a lot. And we have reduced it down to the word. But it means the creative process. But it's kind of the word anyway. It's not completely a wrong thing to say. In the beginning is the beginning vibration. And the beginning of that vibration then begins to go out and begins to ripple through creation. And it brings to it, or it is reflected back to where it came from. And so as you say a thing, so it becomes. The stronger you become in tune with your divine nature, the more the voice has power. But all your voices, even the ones that are just talking, so we'll see. I mean, maybe I was wrong. So go get the donkey, and they bring back the donkey. He gets on it, and he rides into Jerusalem, which could be considered, he rides into the city of peace, but also into the center of consciousness of the area. He goes from the periphery to the interior. Now that periphery is the Christ consciousness going from the periphery of intellectual understanding to the interior of your being, to when you really get that that is who you are. And that is nurtured by anything you might read or hear, by any of that, but it is grown mostly in the intuition, in the heart, in the sense of receptivity. Contemplation of the idea is powerful. Quieting the mind as you contemplate that, then it seems like the links connect. And you go, oh, I'm beginning to get this. And so he travels into Jerusalem on this donkey, which is a symbol of humility. And if you were wondering about this connection of humility to your awakening, it is quite almost paradoxical, isn't it? That the very awakening that you're after, which is really sometimes almost considered blasphemous to speak out loud, that yes, I am a child of God. Often people say, you have no right saying that. Ooh, aren't you being arrogant? It is really the opposite that gets you there. It's the humility that allows you to walk or ride that donkey into your deeper consciousness. It is humility. You come with arrogance, and you will probably be spanked. Would that be the word? It won't happen if you're too proud. It is when we are broken often that it breaks through. It's when your heart really brokens that you know how important love is. It's when you have nothing that you can turn, that you often turn to the source, to the deeper aspects of your being. When the outer is failing, that's often when we turn inward, isn't it? And so this humility is so beautifully important. And praise and blame, they're in that other realm, that other orbit. Praise and blame are on this orbit, but when you get down to humility, you've skipped those. You're neither praise nor blame. You're just moving toward the center. And you can get there riding on a donkey faster than you can get there riding on a horse. So he comes into Jerusalem, and the Pharisees, ooh, they're the bad guys in the story always. So the Pharisees say, all these people that are saying, Hosanna, Hosanna, you are the oh, you're so important and everything. Tell them to shut up. And Jesus says, look, If they were silent, the stones would cry out. Now, think of that. When other people begin to recognize you as that presence, they may or may not say anything, but nature itself will begin to respond. It's very seldom that when that happens, when you begin to deepen sufficiently, and the emphasis might be on sufficiently, into your spiritual nature, that you don't see the fruits of that deepening. It generally happens. It shows up somehow. Something alerts others to who you really are. You begin to be weirdly visible. And you've seen that in some people, haven't you? You go, I remember hearing this story of a Tibetan Lama, and he comes, he's getting off the plane, and you know how it is at the gate when you get off the plane, there's a bunch of people milling around, and people see this guy, and they just start to back up and let him in, because there's a presence about him. And when you have gotten to that point, the stones, even the people in the airport, will say, oh, look, something special. Now, I was listening to Michael Beckwith. Michael Beckwith has this large church in Los Angeles called Agape, and he was in The Secret, and it's been on Oprah, and he was talking about his second visit on Oprah. And Oprah comes to him in the green room and says, look, I'm going to ask you why bad things happen to good people, and you have to answer it in a soundbite. So he says, I have a few minutes, so he's meditating, and then it comes to him. And this is what he says. He said, there are 4 windows for manifestation, 4 windows why things like that can happen. The first one is, what everybody's afraid of, is that it's coming from their own consciousness, that they're making it happen. And it really does happen. It's like what I was talking about earlier. Be careful what you say, be careful what vibration you begin to put out, because as you put that out, so it will come back to you. That's one window in which the bad things can happen to good people. The second window is this, that you raise your sights, you raise your intention, you raise your dream up, and you are not ready for it in the sense of you need some refinement to get there. You need to be able to match that. And so a circumstance is given to you to train you, to refine you, so that you can step into that higher vision. So that because you're not ready yet, it will train you. It will be a gift. And it, like so many of us know, the worst thing that's ever happened to you turns out to be the best thing. That you were not really as good as you are today because you hadn't gone through the fire you went through, but you have now gone through it, and you see what was a curse as a blessing. So that's the second window, is that it comes as a problem, but it turns out to be a blessing. And then the third one is that it comes as a blessing, but you don't see it. And this way, he was told this story. There was a woman who was quite successful, but her heart was closed. And she gets pregnant and has a child, and the child has severe difficulties, development difficulties. But she loves this child. And then at age 11, the child slips and falls into the swimming pool and drowns. She goes to a psychic who is in touch with the other side across the veil. And the psychic says, you know, that child of yours that was so disabled in this life was an avatar. And he came expressly to open your heart. And so sometimes what doesn't look like a blessing is a blessing, not in that way. And then the fourth way, I've forgotten. But you catch a drift, right? I actually think, when I think about Jesus coming into Jerusalem, one of the things I've often said to myself was, what was he thinking? Everybody knows you don't go to Jerusalem during Passover, when the Romans are occupying the city because they're afraid of riots, because they have been occupying the city for years. You don't go to Jerusalem, not even riding on a donkey. You don't want to show up as a threat to the Roman government because they don't take threats lightly. And they're not afraid to kill people. So his death would be almost inevitable. But the fourth way this might happen is that you turn the hand of history with your own actions. And I think that's what this story of Jesus going to Jerusalem and dying and being resurrected is about, is that this is the process of life changing. Have you noticed that so much of this incarnation we are experiencing requires a sense of sacrifice sometimes to get something greater to happen? Perhaps you sacrifice time or talent or treasure. Perhaps you sacrifice your life as it is for your child's life. Perhaps you sacrifice your comfort to see that somebody else does better. And perhaps it's also in the example of being the great example. When you think all has turned to darkness and death, you are only few days away from resurrection. And that the destruction of the present to make a greater future almost always feels like a loss, but it is so necessary in the transformation to a higher state. You must break it to make it better. And that is uncomfortable. And that is ugly often. But it's just the beginning steps of the dance toward resurrection. Where that was lost was replaced tenfold, or as they say in the Bible, you bury the grain and the ear of corn appears. Right? First a little, then a lot. This is the path of your life. We want it to be like marshmallow soft the whole way. But it turns out it ain't that way. It's often difficult. It's often painful. We're often stretched, even crushed in the process. But like grapes to wine, it's part of the process. We go through it easier when we have faith that all things are working together for our good. We have faith when we choose to see life not so much as a problem, but as an exploration. When we choose to recognize that the part of us that we have so often ignored is what will live on forever. That this life of being a body is temporary, but this life of being a soul has a through line to the whole and the complete and the perfect. So let us build our faith by taking this example of Jesus in the story of Easter, not only as a hero doing it, but as our heroic journey, our movement into the next phase of our awakening, that we no longer occupy just the body, but we are consciousness itself. Let's take that journey. Let's awaken, and let's let our life be a life that so blooms by being willing, inviting the transformation no matter what it takes. May this be a fantastic experience, a journey of your life that you love because you see, oh my God, I have come this far. Sorry, Jay. I woke up, so Friday morning at 5:30, I woke up. I'm bragging now. I woke up at 5:30, I got up and I walked outside, and the moon was almost full and was almost setting. I could just see it. I sat down on the deck, rubbed my dog's back, and I was giddy. It was my 71st birthday at the hour I was born 71 years ago. I rarely have this sense of, wow, look where your life has come in that 71 years. But I had it at that moment. I went, look at the journey I've been on. And it's not a straight line, I can tell you. And all the Easters, no, all the Good Fridays I've been through, and some of the Easters just popped into memory, and I went, wow, what a trip. I wish the same for you. So let us pray. Let's always start with the awareness. Begin to be aware that you're feeling a body and you have emotion of something in there. And that the body also has texture and weight. And the breath is in and out. The heart, you may even feel that beating. So here we are. And this body belongs on this earth. You are not a stranger, but you are the fruit of the earth. So. And your spirit is also like your body. It belongs in this universe. It is part of this universe. It is part of God. And it is unfolding and unfolding again. And unfolding again. And so there you are, on the path, willing and eager to know yourself as you really are. And so it is. Amen.